Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Hudson again today with chapter 19. So I wonder what today's chapter is going to have in store. Let's find out. Papa! Cried Lily, but the relief that flooded over her was quickly followed by a growing sense of horror. Papa looked awful, his body twisted, his arms limp. Her heart went out to him. What have you done? She cried. Nothing he didn't deserve. Mould's mirrored eyes shimmered with glee. Say hello, Roach told Papa, and the pair of them let him go so that he slumped to the floor, collapsing in a tangled heap like a stringless marionette. Professor Silverfish regarded his old friend with bare disdain. I'm afraid my men performed a few experiments on John to jog his memory. He stepped back as if Papa's despair might tarnish his shoes. Papa raised his head and stared at Lily. My darling, my dear one. His words sounded fractured and choked with tears, but he gritted his teeth and continued. Why did you come? Lily gulped down the pain in her chest. To find you. I sent a letter with Malkin, warning you not to. You're supposed to hide. Where is he? He should be taking care of you. Professor Silverfish laughed and waved the singed letter at him. Oh, she got your letter all right. Thought it said I would help. Imagine, your own words brought her right here, along with my encouragement, of course. And now, John, you will tell us where the Cogheart is, or resume work on your new prototype. Otherwise, I shall be doing a little surgery myself. He took Lily's chin between his strong fingers and turned her face towards Papa's. First, I shall cut off her ears, then her toes, then fingers, and then when I've finished with those, I shall cut off every other piece of her until there's nothing left. He let her go, and Papa gave an anguished cry, but Professor Silverfish ignored him and consulted his pocket watch. I'll give you an hour to accept my offer. He glanced at Robert. Meantime, while we wait, perhaps I'll chop a few digits off this boy. I hear he's not a particularly good clockmaker. He waved a hand at Mould. Take John back to his lab. Mould bent down and grasped Papa round the neck. You let go of him, Lily screamed. She grabbed a glass from the table and threw it at them. It missed, smashing against the wall. Mould laughed as he dragged Papa from the room. Professor Silverfish stood in the doorway and lit another cigar as he watched Mr. Roach creep round the table towards Lily. No, you don't, Robert said. He picked up a china plate and threw it at Roach, but Roach batted it away harmlessly with his stick and it clattered onto the floor. Robert took Lily's hand and pulled her round the far side of the table, then realised there was no escape. The pretty frescoes on the walls, the plants on their stands and tables of bright objects all disguised the fact that the room had no windows. This way, Lily cried, kicking over a chair. She tried to drag Robert under the table, but Roach dropped his stick and scooped them up in his arms, throwing two sweaty palms across their faces. I've tried to be nice, Professor Silverfish exhaled a puff of smoke, but I can't have you wreaking havoc in my house. He stepped into the hallway. Lock the children in the coal shed, Mr. Roach. I'll attend to them later. Right now, I want to see if John has had a change of heart. Mr. Roach gripped Lily's and Robert's arms and marched them across the courtyard behind the house. The coal shed was set into an exterior wall, and Lily immediately thought of the one back at school. Roach opened its doors, then frisked Robert and got him to turn out his pockets. Now you, he said, stepping over to Lily. If you dare lay a hand on me, she spat, I'll kill you. Roach laughed. I'm not the one who'll be dead, missy, he said, throwing them both inside. We'll be back to collect you in a while. Something tells me Papa's going to start cooperating pretty soon. He slammed the door and locked it, leaving them alone in the dark. Robert and Lily watched him through a barred grate in the door, as he hung the key on a hook embedded in the end wall, then went back into the house. As soon as he'd gone, Lily shook the door handle. She pressed her face against the grate and peered down at the padlock. "We have to get out of here," she whispered. "What's the use?" Robert said. A sudden flash of jealousy flared inside him. He slumped onto a pile of coal in the corner. He'd lost everything because of her papa and that stupid Professor Silverfish's quarrel. She still had a glimmer of hope, but he had nothing. "I knew something about that professor wasn't right," he snapped. "And now, after all we've been through, I'm in a coal shed waiting to die." Lily glared at him. "So don't wait then. Look, we're not going to die in a coal shed. We're going to escape and save Papa." "If you say so." Lily rolled up the sleeves of her dress and stuck her arm out through the gap between the bars. "I can almost reach the lock." She plucked a hairpin from her head with her free hand and straightened it in her teeth, then passed it out through the gap in the bars. Lily bit her lip, concentrating. Robert held his breath. There was a scritch and a scratch, then dink! "Drat," she said. "I dropped it." She stamped her foot and stared at him. "Well, aren't you going to help me?" He felt guilty then. None of this was her fault, not really. They'd all been hurt by those men. She was right. He should at least try and do something to get them out of here. He pulled his penknife from where it was tucked inside his sock and handed it to her. "Here, try this instead." Lily examined it. "The blades are too big. How have you still got this anyway?" He shrugged. "I hid it earlier in my sock. It's been pretty uncomfortable there, actually." He rubbed his ankle. "If only Malkin could get the key for us." "Of course," Lily twirled him around. "Malkin's still waiting." "Malkin!" she shouted through the door grate. "He'll never hear you," Robert grumbled. "He's too far away. Besides, he's probably run down by now." Lily ignored him. She wiped her coal-blackened fingers on her silk dress, put them in her mouth and whistled. Robert thought it was probably the loudest wolf whistle in the world, but instead of a wolf, they got Malkin. He shot across the yard in a red streak and jumped at the door. His red snout poked between the bars, pushing until his whole head fitted through the gap. "Got yourselves into a spot of bother?" he asked sniffily. "What's going on?" "I'll tell you in a moment," Lily said, "but you need to get us out of here." "I see," Malkin said. "Now you need my help." "The key's on the hook over there." She pointed across the yard. "First, you have to apologise," he told her. "What?" she spluttered. The fox licked at his black forepaw. "Because you said I was too scruffy to come inside. You've had a wash and brush up, I see." "There isn't time for this," Lily cried, exasperated. "Besides, it wasn't me who said you were scruffy, it was that butler." "You didn't disagree with him, though," Robert chimed in. "Precisely," the fox snapped. "And now look where you are." "Fine, I'm sorry," Lily said. "Get the keys, would you?" "As you wish." Malkin stepped over to the wall and jumped and snapped at the key on its nail. It was unreachable. He'd have to leap much higher to snatch it. He looked around. Some old barrel kegs were stacked in a corner. Malkin butted one over with his head. His tail drooped as he rolled it towards the hanging key. Then he hopped up onto the side of the barrel and jumped. This time he managed to snap his teeth round the bottom of the key. It fell from its hook and Malkin caught it in his mouth before collapsing in a heap on the floor. "Thank heaven!" Lily thrust her hand through the bars of the shed. "Now quick, bring it here." Malkin jumped up and dropped the key into her palm, and she reached down and undid the padlock. As soon as she stepped from the shed, she bent down and kissed his nose. And Robert crowded in and stroked his head. "Malkin, you're a cat-burgling genius," he whispered. "Yes, Malkin," Lily murmured, scratching the fox's fluffy ears. "You are a genius. I shall write to Jackdaw of your exploits. He's bound to immortalise you in his next burglary book." Malkin gave a protesting yap. "Enough messing. We have to go." Lily took the winder from round his neck and wound him. "No," she said. "You have to. Find Anna and ask for her help. Robert and I are going back inside for Papa." Malkin's dark eyes widened and his whiskers twitched. "John's in the house?" "Yes," Lily said, "and we're going to rescue him." Lily and Robert crouched in the frosty garden and watched Malkin squeeze himself between the tall railings. He dropped his tail and kept his body low as he slunk off down the street. When he'd finally gone, Lily wrinkled her nose and looked up at the house. "We can get in there," she explained, pointing at a small open window over the back porch, obscured by the bare branches of a tree, like climbing the trellis at home. She gave Robert a searching look. "It's going to be dangerous, so if you don't want to come, you don't have to." Robert shook his head. "I do want to. For my da. I want to help you stop them." "Good." Lily jumped up and grabbed a low-hanging branch of the tree. Then she climbed into its bare crown. Robert took a deep breath and followed. By the time he got up among the branches, Lily had already crept out along a bough. She dropped down onto the porch roof above the back door and beckoned for him to follow. As soon as he arrived, she climbed through the open window. The room they tumbled into was dimly lit. Robert crept across the floor, opened the door, and looked out. He was about to step in the hall when Lily brushed his arm. "There's someone else here," she whispered. She was right. Robert saw the room was filled with the shadowy shapes of old mechs. One leaned stiff against the wall, another sat square in a corner with its legs sticking out. A third lay toppled on the floor. Wires sprouted from their chest panels and their arms, and some of their limbs had been ripped open. Lily stepped towards them and started as she saw their faces. "Why, it's Captain Springer," she said, "and Mr. Wingnut and Miss Tock. All our mechanicals from home." She stroked their faces and examined their injuries. "Madame Verdigris must have sold them to him." Then she stopped. A funny look came over her face, and she rushed into the corner where a mechanical woman stood half hidden in the shadows. Robert heard her sharp intake of breath. "Robert, it's Mrs. Rust!" The old mech woman had wires sprouting from the end of one arm. Metal flanges and springs stuck out in a jagged pattern from the place where her hand should be. Lily searched round Mrs. Rust's neck for her unique winder on its chain, and when she found it, she wound the mech woman's springs until she flickered to life. Mrs. Rust blinked in surprise at Lily. "Clockwork and click wheels," she cried. "It's my Tiger Lil!" And when she realised what this meant, she burst into tears. "Those ratchet-faced villains, they captured you too?" "They did, Rusty. But what on earth are you doing here?" "It was those men, Roach and Mould," Mrs. Rust explained. "They brought us to this place, wanted to know about one of John's inventions, the Cogheart. I'd already told Madame we knew nothing about it. I told them that too, but they kept us prisoner, tortured us, pulled our grommets and loose bits off." "I'm sorry," Lily told her. "It's all right," Mrs. Rust said. "We'll survive. We're made of sterner stuff. Quick, wind the others." "Of course, Rusty." Lily kissed her on the nose, and then she and Robert ran around, winding the other mechanicals as fast as they could. While they wound, Lily whispered their names to awaken them. "Captain Springer, Mr. Wingnut, Miss Tock, please wake up." And though he didn't know them, Robert found himself joining in. He helped Lily with a mechanical man whose beard was made from curled metal shavings and who had eyebrows of moulded steel. As soon as he was ticking, the man jumped to attention and saluted. "Captain Springer, chauffeur mechanical, first class, at your service." They wound a mechanical woman with a bottle-top nose, who blinked pin-light eyes behind thick round eyeglasses. "Who's there?" she spluttered. "Miss Tock," Lily exclaimed. "It's me." "Lily?" Miss Tock seemed confused. "Where am I? I was in the garden clearing leaves with Mr. Wingnut. What the devil is this place?" Then she saw Mrs. Rust and Captain Springer, and her bright eyes faded. "Oh," she said, "now I remember." Lily and Robert wound the last mechanical, a fellow in a long tailcoat with ears made from wingnuts that stuck out the side of his bucket head. He woke with a jitter and bowed low and creakily to them. "Mr. Wingnut, gardening mechanical, at your service." The four mechanicals shambled about, talking and ticking with one another. "Thank goodness you woke us," Miss Tock said. "Claptraptions!" cried Captain Springer. "Now my wheels are turning, I can recall everything." "If I can just get myself perambulating in third gear," Mr. Wingnut spluttered, "then we shall see what we shall see." "By all that ticks," Springer concluded, "we're still alive, aren't we?" "Pipes and pincushions, yes." Mrs. Rust hugged Robert and Lily, dusting their faces with rusty kisses. "Thanks to these two lovelies here." "This is Robert," Lily explained, "and he's ever so brave. He helped me escape roach and mould when they came to Brackenbridge, and he repaired Malkin's bullet wound with his dar." "Mangles and motors, you've been through the ringer?" Mrs. Rust gazed at Robert. "He must have the heart of a mech lion if he helped you survive such dastardly dealings." She pinched Robert's cheek until he turned away, blushing. Mrs. Rust took Lily aside. "Lily, your papa's alive," she whispered, "being held in the basement." "I know," Lily replied, her voice full of determination. "And with your help, we'll get him out." So, do you think they will manage to save him? Will the four of those mechanicals come together with the two of them and form a team that's unstoppable? What do you think? How are they going to manage to defeat the Professor Silverfish and Roach and Mould? It's going to take an awful lot of doing to defeat them when they've come so far, but hopefully they will. So you have to wait now until Monday for the next chapter, but it'll be Mrs. Gaines with you on Monday reading chapter 20. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.